Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. So this lecture is on STS or Security Token Service. So STS can be an important exam topic in the Certified Security Specialty, and in particular you should know how STS integrates with Active Directory, which we're going to cover in this lecture. So what is STS? Well, basically it grants users limited and temporary access to AWS resources, and your users can come from three sources. So they can come from federation. So federation just means you're federating or you're cooperating with some other form of authentication service, and typically this would be Active Directory. And hopefully all of you know what Active Directory is, but when you sign into your Windows PCs at your office and you're entering in your SSO or single sign-on, that is just basically federating with a service called Active Directory. It's one of Microsoft's most famous services. So federation typically is done with Active Directory, and it uses a security assertion markup language, or SAML, and this basically grants temporary access based off the user's Active Directory credentials. So the users don't need to be a user in IAM when you federate with Active Directory. They just need to be a user within your Active Directory environment. And single sign-on allows users to log into the AWS console without assigning an IAM credential. So that's what Security Token Service helps to enable, basically, and we'll show you how it works in a second. But basically, you can just sign into the AWS console using the same username and password that you would sign into when you sign into your workstation in the morning. You can also use STS to federate with mobile apps. So you can use it, you can use your Facebook login or your Amazon credentials or Google or anything else that's supported by OpenID providers, and STS will grant you temporary access to the AWS resources. And you can also use STS with cross-account access, and cross-account access lets users from one AWS account to access resources in another. So just let's understand some key terms before we continue. So federation, like I said, is just combining or joining a list of users in one domain, such as IAM, with a list of users in another domain, such as Active Directory or Facebook or your Amazon credentials or your Google credentials or LinkedIn or whatever. An identity broker is a service that allows you to take an identity from point A and join it or federate it to point B. An identity store is just services like Active Directory, Facebook, Google, etc. It's where you're going to store all your identities, and then your identities themselves are just a user. So identity is a user, they're all stored in an identity store like Active Directory or Facebook or whatever, and then you create an identity broker, and that basically allows you to take those identities in your identity store and join them up to Identity Access Management, and that's essentially the federation of it. So you're federating or you're joining IAM with your Active Directory or Facebook, etc. And the service that allows you to do that is Security Token Service. So once it's all broken down, it becomes a lot easier. So let's do a scenario. You're hosting a company website on some EC2 web servers in your VPC, and users of the website must log into the site, which then authenticates against the company's Active Directory servers, which are based on site at the company's headquarters. Your VPC is connected to your company HQ via a secure IPsec VPN. And once logged in, the user can only have access to their own S3 bucket. How would you go about setting this up? Well, basically, we do it using this diagram. So we've got our employees and we've got our enterprise reporting applications. This could be our, essentially this would be our web application. Then what we want to do is go ahead and create an identity broker. And so our identity broker is just going to essentially join Active Directory to our Identity Access Management. So this is something you're going to have to develop yourself. But basically, our identity broker is going to authenticate against Active Directory first. Really important to remember that. And then once that has credentials, it's going to be passed a token from Active Directory, and it's going to pass that to the Security Token Service, which is then going to give us another token. So it authenticates with Active Directory first, then it authenticates with STS. Once we have STS, we can, our STS token, we can then pass that back to our custom web application or our enterprise reporting application. That's then going to authenticate against S3. And when we authenticate against S3, it's just going to look at our STS and our username and say whether or not it's a valid user, which it will be. And it's doing that using Identity Access Management. And then once that's done, we're able to access S3. So it is pretty simple. It's just important to remember the steps that basically you always authenticate against Active Directory first, or against Facebook first, or against Google, or whatever. So the third-party authentication provider first. We then will authenticate or take that token to the AWS security token service. It's going to give us a temporary access to our AWS environment. And then when we go and access S3, basically S3 is going to ask us for our username and our temporary STS token, and it will then check that against IAM, and if everything's in order, it will give us access to S3. So I've just run through that, I've explained it, but here are the bullet points. So employee enters their username and password, the application calls an identity broker, the broker catches the username and password, the identity broker then uses the organization's Active Directory to validate the employee's identity. The identity broker then calls the get federation token function using IAM credentials. The call must include an IAM policy and a duration, which can be 1 to 36 hours, along with a policy that specifies the permissions to be granted to the temporary security credentials. So you have to have the policies set up in IAM. Security token service then confirms that the policy of the IAM user making the call to get federation token has permissions to create new tokens, and then returns 4 values to the application. Those 4 values are an access key, a secret access key, a token, and a duration, so the token's lifetime. And that lifetime is always going to be 1 to 36 hours. The identity broker then returns the temporary security credentials to the reporting application, so this is to our custom web application. The data storage application then uses those temporary security credentials, including the token, to make a request to S3, and then S3 uses IAM to verify the credentials and to allow the requested operation on the given S3 bucket, and then IAM provides S3 with a go-ahead to perform the requested operation. So what are my exam tips? Well, just remember how this works from a high-level point of view. So you've got your employees, they're trying to log in the morning, you've got your custom web application here that you've made yourself, you've got your identity broker here that you've made yourself. The identity broker basically takes their username and password, it checks it against whatever your user directory is. So in this case, it's Active Directory. It could be against Facebook, it could be against LinkedIn, whatever it is you're using to verify your credentials. If those credentials are correct, it will then authenticate against that, and it will then authenticate using the AWS security token service. The security token service is going to give it 4 different items. You won't need to remember them all for the exam, but essentially it's going to give you a token, and a token that has a time limit on it. So you're only getting temporary permission to access the AWS environment. Once you've got that token, you're then going to pass that back to your application. Your application is going to try and access S3, and it's going to pass it the STS token. That's going to be checked by IAM and just make sure that the token is valid, and if it is, you'll get access to S3. So you just need to remember going into the exam how STS works at a high level. You're going to get a bunch of different scenario questions, and they're going to try and mix these steps up. So just remember, it's really simple. Authenticate against whatever it is you want to authenticate against first, so whether it's Active Directory or Facebook or whatever. So you authenticate against the third party first. Then you authenticate against STS. STS will give you a token. Then when you try and access your AWS resource, whether it's S3, DynamoDB, whatever, that resource will quickly just check that token against IAM, and if everything's correct, it will give you access to the platform. So that is it for this lecture, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.